This is Chapter 6, Part 1. We're going to talk about these next stages leading up to, or part of, culminating in the mass killing attack. And these next phases are breaching and then the actual attack itself. So let me just read this point here that the chapter covers the breach or entrance of the killer at the planned location, as well as the lack of empathy of the killers. So those are two themes that are covered in this chapter. In addition, the author has a case study of the Black church shooting, which I won't take the time because I'm going to be running out of time, I'm afraid. I won't take the time to cover that, but please go over that and get the details, but especially the big picture of that case. And as you should always do in this course, try to see similarities from case to case to case so that we can kind of build a picture of what you most commonly see with these killings. Now, again, with the case study in this chapter shows kind of an ideological, racialized sort of killing, which is a subset. It's not the the it's not a crime that has that feature in all or most other sorts of mass killings, so it's a subset. But it's definitely an interesting and important case to take a look at. Um, so this issue of entering a location, typically these crimes occur in a very well-defined location like a school. And so when you have a defined location like that, you're going to have some sort of entrance issue. How is the killer going to enter? So when entering, they could do a range of various strategies in entering the location. They may pick a fixed spot and start, and I got a typo there, they might start shooting in an open space, like we see that in the case of Charles Whitman at the University of Austin shooting. 1966, he gets up on the tower and is shooting down at passersby, students, faculty, etc., from a set spot, from a tower, which is a good position to shoot down on victims. So that's one way to do it, is to pick a spot where one spot where you can have a lot of people out in the open as targets. So you can start shooting in an open space. They might conceal what they are doing and enter the space quietly, so people will conceal their weapons, maybe put them in a bag, put them in a case of some sort. Take handguns, take short, sawed-off shotgun that's easier to conceal and sneak into a facility quietly and then start shooting up the place. They might, in the case that we saw with the one in Connecticut, Sandy Hook, that he blasted his way through window panes, through doors and into the facility. So you can get that sort of so come shooting up the place as they enter, maybe using the gun if they need to be able to enter the space, or they might even, you see cases where they'll start shooting even before they enter the facility. If we're talking a school shooting, they might start shooting in the parking lot and then walk their way into the school and commit their crime. So there's not just one way this is done. There's different strategies that are used. Now, we are socialized. Now, the author really spends most of the time in this chapter talking about sort of the issue of empathy, the issue of how can someone commit these serious crimes, and uses the case study of the Black church shooting, where the killer in that case goes in and spends, 30 minutes with these church members during a service, sitting right next to them quietly, peacefully, like he's there for religious reasons, and can sit with these people for that long and totally lack the empathy where he just get up and start shooting up the place. So that motivates the author to sort of raise this question of where do these people get this lack of humanity, this deadness inside where they have no empathy towards other people. So the author writes that we are socialized against murder. So most people are reluctant to kill, even if it's justified. In case of self-defense, if you get attacked, somebody breaks into your home, people actually have a lot of reluctance to kill somebody else, even if it's protecting their own lives or the lives of their loved ones. And battle, military experience shows that even in that situation where you're justified in shooting at others or trying to kill other people, they're trying to kill you. You see a lot of reluctance on the kind of natural reluctance to kill other people. So that's not a real secret. That's something we all understand, and we're all socialized, meaning we're taught from childhood that killing is an evil thing, and that something that absolutely should not be done. So we feel it, and there is a lot of reluctance. And so the author cites some research here that only a fairly low percentage of people do not find it extremely difficult to kill. So you do have a subset of people who are colder, have less empathy, who are more comfortable with violence, more comfortable with killing. So you get a subset of people like that. But most people in general find it extremely difficult if put in a situation where they have to kill somebody. So it goes against the way that we're socialized, and to some extent, I think we're naturally not comfortable murdering people. At least most people. I'm not saying everybody. You got a subset that I think is comfortable killing other people, a subset of humans. Reluctance to kill among soldiers can evidently be reduced by, and I list 4 things. Number 1, repeatedly shooting human-like targets. So there's a desensitization that goes on, where if you kind of killing human-like objects or human-like images, and let's say that once you start killing in a battle, in a war, that as you kill more and more, you tend to get, humans are that way, they get used to even horrible things. So you get used to it. That's what we're getting at, is that as you do it more, humans are flexible and they can get used to doing even horrible things. Number 2, if you do drills, so that this is research on soldiers, right, fighting in battles. If you drill soldiers on proper fighting techniques, that makes them more comfortable, more likely to kill other people if they're trained to know how to do it. And again, a lot of it's getting used to the idea of doing it. And also becoming more skillful where there's going to be less fear of killing somebody else. Number 3 is that also if you spread out the responsibility for killing. So you could say, well, my commander ordered that we kill people, and so it's not really my responsibility. I'm just doing my job. And so along with that is number 4, which is putting responsibility on the commander. So it's a shift of responsibility, so you don't feel guilty about doing it. You're like, it's not really me. I'm just, I didn't make the decision. I just followed what I was told to do. So I'm almost like a tool. And so it's not really my responsibility. So now, mass killers, this is not the case of mass killers, that they don't need typically to have this kind of conditioning, training, indoctrination into becoming more comfortable killing. These folks are a subset of humans who are more comfortable in harming others, and a lot of the reason why they're comfortable is that they lack empathy towards other human beings. What do we mean by empathy? The ability to put yourself in the shoes of somebody else and feel where they're coming from, or to be able to understand, to see where somebody else is coming from, and to kind of see somebody else like you would see yourself, right? These guys lack that. So there's 2 kinds of empathy that the author explains: cognitive and affective. So what we mean by cognitive is that it's the mental ability to put yourself in the shoes of somebody else, the ability to imagine that you're in the shoes of somebody else. So it's a thinking process. But that's only half of empathy. The other half of it is affective, which is another word for emotional. So that emotional, affective empathy is the ability to feel what another person is feeling. to imagine how somebody else is feeling and to feel like they do. If they're feeling pain, you feel pain, right? If they're feeling scared, you feel scared. So there's two sides to that. And these two types of empathy, cognitive and affective, involve different brain regions, so they're somewhat different things. They may be, you may have different, you may be someone who's really high in cognitive empathy, you really understand other people in a mental way, but you may be really low on affective empathy. And in fact, as a matter of fact, this is really the case often with violent people, and often going to be the case with these killers, is they might be able to sort of put themselves in your shoes mentally and kind of understand in a mental way, in a hypothetical, theoretical way, what it would be like to be in your shoes. The difference between them and you and me is they don't care. They don't care about you. It's that emotional empathy that they lack. They can imagine it, but they just have no concern about your feelings, your rights, your life as a human being, your importance. They don't care. They don't feel it. And so that's a lot of times what the problem in with these guys is, lacking the effective type of empathy. They might understand another person, but they do not care. The problem with this question of empathy, as with so many of these traits of these unusual killers like serial killers and mass killers, is that they have these traits like lack of empathy that have a significant, here I have a technical term, heritability. And that's just based on genetic research, how much of an influence genes have on these traits, these characteristics that individuals have. So according to the research, somewhere between 50 and 60% of whether you're empathetic or not is influenced by genes. So quite a big chunk of the story of whether you're an empathetic person or not, according to the research, is the particular set of genes that you got from your parents. We all have about 20,000 genes, and those genes only have a tiniest little, each only has really an insignificant influence on you, but you put them all together, 20,000 of them, and they can have quite a significant influence on the way your brain works, the way your brain's wired, how you think and feel about things. And so this empathy thing does have quite a bit of genetic influence. So, and the rest of it, we know that if it's not genetic, it's going to be environmental influences on your empathy, on how you feel. And the problem with that is that, according to the same kind of genetic research, that the environmental part is kind of hard to control. It's like a lot of little things that are hard to get a handle on to be able to enhance or teach empathy in people. It's difficult to change that trait. And so this is a challenge that we face when it comes to increasing empathy, reducing violence, is that these people have, to a certain extent, a brain that functions wired in a certain way, that responds to things in a certain way. And it's just, it's a challenge to change those ways of behaving. So yes, so I'll get this point here that most of the rest of this is environmental when it's not genetic, of course. But those factors are not well understood and are hard to control and to effectively get a handle on and change. So it's a challenge. The author stresses theory of mind, has a section on theory of mind, but I don't want to emphasize that in this discussion, because theory of mind is something that's closely related to deficits that autistic people have, and we've mentioned autism previously in these lectures. And it's not really the kind of thing that, as far as I would see what the research indicates, it's not really something that makes a lot of sense to emphasize too much, because as I've mentioned before, that someone suffering from autism or being on what they call the spectrum, the autistic spectrum, that does not predict a higher risk of violent behavior than the general population. So it's not really a risk factor for violence. And so a theory of mind, it seems like probably wouldn't be a great risk factor or a great predictor of violence like some of the other things would. So again, I think that's probably not something that I would stress. And again, it kind of gets more into the cognitive empathy, the understanding of another person's mind, but seems, according to the research, that the lack of emotional effective empathy seems to be more important and more key thing here. So I'm not going to stress the section of theory of mind that she talks about. Disorders which do predict violence, and I've mentioned this before, but just to stress that again, antisocial personality disorder, which I didn't really mention before, but this is something very common among criminals, this type of personality disorder. Also bipolar disorder, which I may not have mentioned before, but I know I mentioned schizophrenia before. So those are three well-known sort of challenges, difficulties that people face that do raise the risk that you're going to act violently. So it makes more sense to focus on these sorts of disorders and traits more than something like the theory of mind, which she mentions. The us versus them thinking is a really, I think, an important concept to understand, especially for these ideological killers like the killer that's in the case study in this chapter. But it's really an important psychological reality for, important for lots of different things. That is that what do we mean by this us versus them? There's a very strong tendency for human beings to divide up people in terms of us versus them. It's just very easy for humans to do that. I mean, you do it with sports teams. You give this team the color blue and that team the color green, and before you know it, they're hating each other. They're enemies, even though the green and the blue are totally arbitrary, because people do that. They form groups, us versus them. That and also this other term, dehumanization, are important for understanding mass killers, especially certain kinds of mass killers. Now, so there's this very strong tendency to divide humans into us versus them. This can help explain the more ideological killers, because see, if it's an us them sort of motivated crime, you're killing them for us. Who's us? Well, you're some group that hates some other group. Terrorist attacks are a good example of this. Our group hates their group, and so we're going to go kill some of them to intimidate them, to inflict terror on them, to convince them they need to give up or give us what we want. See, so you're committing the crime not just for you, you're doing it for your group that you're representing, whatever that group is, us versus them. Now, this is most relevant for ideological killers, because that sort of killer is sometimes called a mission killer, is someone who's doing it for a group. I'm going to go kill these hated targets because for my group, not just for me, for my group. But what happens most of the time with these mass killings, again, I'm talking about mass killings in general, not these unusual or these very famous cases. Speaking generally, it's usually not in the minds of the killers. It's usually they're out to get me. It's not us versus them. It's them versus me. I got a problem with them. They have been harassing me. They have been rejecting me. They have been humiliating me. They've been making me feel like a failure and causing me to fail and blocking my path, breaking ruining my ability to reach my goals. It's them against me. So most of these crimes are me motivated. You're not doing it for a group, you're doing it for you, right? That's a different sort of dynamic than us versus them, right? It's me versus people that whatever the group is that I hate. Now, it can be kind of a symbolic group, like everybody at the school, even though I don't know half of the kids, I go shoot up the school because I hate the school. It doesn't always have to be specific people that you have a beef with. Sometimes it can be specific people you have a beef with, but sometimes it can be more symbolic than that. But so I want to stress this point though, that a lot of times it's not the us versus them. It's motivated. I have a beef with the world or with society or with the school or whatever, the workplace, whatever it is. The tendency to reduce the value, should say the value of others to dehumanize them helps explain much violence. This is an important term for violence in general, because we know it's wrong. It's generally wrong to kill people or to physically harm people. But what if they're not people? What if you can, in your mind, reduce them down to something less than human? So it's much easier to attack and hurt somebody that you have a beef with if you see them as being less than human. So you see, and not only with crime, but you see it with like genocide, with ethnic cleansing, with war, where the enemy gets dehumanized. They're cockroaches, they're vermin, right? They're less than human. They're insects. They're scum. So they're not human. It makes it easy to kill them. So a lot of times you'll reduce what they are in your mind, turn them into objects as opposed to real live full human beings. That's a human tendency to dehumanize others. Happens in many contexts. These traits, I should say, are very deep seated. The tendency to create us versus them, the blaming others, it's me versus the world or me versus my enemies. That tendency, the tendency to dehumanize. These are very deep seated in these killers, but they can. And we talked earlier about there is a certain, when I say deep seated, there is a certain biological element to it, the way the brain is wired and operates. But these things, these tendencies can be influenced by culture, by the society you live in, how you're raised. So that's by socialization, what you learn growing up about what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. Is it appropriate to dehumanize others, to treat them, to think of them as being less than fully human? Are you raised that way or not? If you're part of a counterculture that encourages us versus them, we're good, they're evil, they deserve to be killed, that kind of stuff. So, of course, social factors matter. They matter a lot. So I don't want in this chapter to, overemphasize that sort of hardwired biological aspect of it, because indeed human beings are their culture, environment, these sorts of social factors are very important. And there's, of course, a lot of times what we're going to be focusing on to try to reduce and prevent these kinds of crimes. Okay, so we'll leave it there.